The work of the Royal Commission that MacDonald appointed in 1887 to mollify the Trent Valley Canal Association, who were disappointed at the high cost of the proposed expansion in the survey by Rubidge, continued to plod along with delegations, surveys, presentations, all of which very strongly supported expanding the canal system. As the 1891 federal election approached, the pace of the Royal Commission picked up. The Royal Commission, appointed by John A. Macdonald in 1887 to mollify the Trent Valley Canal Association lobbyists who were disappointed at the high cost of canal expansion in the Rubidge Report, continued its work plodding along with surveys, presentations, delegations, examinations, and even a field trip to look at potential costs for a canal expansion. However, as the 1891 election approached, the pace of the Commission's work increased significantly. Until just prior to the election, the Commission reported strongly in favor of expanding the canal system beyond the few locks that existed at that point. Canal politics continued to work their magic for John A. Macdonald and his Conservative Party. Just prior to the 1891 election call, Macdonald announced that the work of the Royal Commission had been completed and that it was in favor of expanding the canal. The deal was, very clearly, as it had worked in the past, Macdonald put it out there: if you want more canals, more locks, vote Conservative. And guess what? It worked again. Conservative candidates all along the proposed canal route won successfully, and the result was a decision to continue with contracts to build more locks for the system. As you can imagine, the Trent Valley Canal Association was ecstatic over the recommendation and the government's commitment to expand the system. Their enthusiasm quickly turned to bitter disappointment. However, 1891, John A. Macdonald passed away, and a string of inept Conservative prime ministers failed to take action on the canal. In 1894, a delegation of over 300 mayors, reeves, steamboat operators, tourism operators descended on Ottawa, demanding the government live up to its commitment. They had done their part to ensure Conservative victories. They now expected the government to do its part. And as had happened in the past, as the 1896 election approached, the government committed itself to expanding the system and advertised contracts. 2 new routes were to be added to the growing canal system: a stretch from Lake Simcoe to Balsam Lake, and a second stretch from Peterborough up to Lakefield. There had been no through navigation along that stretch of the Otonabee River, and there was great jubilation that the government had committed itself to building the system even further. The most challenging section in this new phase of canal construction was the Peterborough to Lakefield stretch. It was divided into 2 parts. First part from Nassau Mills, today where Trent University is, up to Lakefield. That involved a series of 5 locks with dams, entrance piers, and bridges where necessary to allow boats to bypass the rapids on the Otonabee River. 5 locks were built using concrete, an innovative piece of technology that had not been used in Canada for canal design, a real first for the Trent-Severn Waterway. However, the most challenging section for this phase of canal construction was a stretch from Little Lake right through till Nassau. The engineer in charge of this challenging section of canal work was Richard Birdsell Rogers. Rogers is a really interesting character, one of the great engineers in Canadian history. He was a Peterborough boy, born right here in town, took his engineering degree at McGill, and was hired on as an engineer on the canal in 1884. So he was professionally trained and experienced on canal construction, and it was a good thing because the task in front of him was monumental. The principal justification for canal expansion, as outlined in the Royal Commission report, was due largely to the rapid expansion of the Canadian prairies and the bountiful harvests of wheat that were being produced in the prairies. Wheat was being sold overseas and needed quick, easy access to those markets. Railways could do the job, but it was argued strongly, particularly by the canal promoters, that a barge system on a navigation route would be far more efficient. But that was predicated on a quick, efficient dispatch of grain from the prairies through to Lake Ontario, down the St. Lawrence to markets overseas. That meant boats or pulling barges with wheat, it may seem a bit fanciful now, but that was the argument, had to be moved quickly before freeze-up. The challenge for Rogers was how to overcome the 66-foot change in elevation between Little Lake and up just past the town of Peterborough. A series of standard locks, much like you see on the Rideau Canal at Bytown, would have been far too slow and could have easily scuppered the whole project. As a result, Rogers came up with what proved to be a very innovative, creative, and far-seeking design. He suggested and convinced the government that a hydraulic lift lock would provide a quickness of dispatch and allow vessels to move much quicker through that stretch of the canal. Rogers had been on a fact-finding mission to Europe and Britain in early 1896, looking at designs of the small, very low-scale hydraulic lift locks that were built in Europe, and came back enthused on the potential of this new technology being applied to the challenges here in Peterborough. Rogers came up with an innovative design to overcome the change in elevation. Unlike what he saw in Europe, Rogers proposed building the hydraulic lift lock out of unreinforced cement. This had never been tried anywhere in the world and was certainly a bold and potentially risky suggestion by Rogers, but he was convinced that the technologies would work. What he envisioned was a massive concrete wall holding back the earth, a wall that was 40 feet thick, some 65 feet tall, and about 125 feet wide at the base. This is a pretty significant concrete pour, and it was done with a dry pour and no steel reinforcement. Again, totally innovative, a unique and really bold vision by Rogers. The contract to do this work was put out to public tender and was won by a firm in Ottawa, a firm known as Corey and Lavigure, who, and I emphasize this, expertise was in house building, not a strong recommendation for undertaking an innovative, untried, pioneering piece of engineering work. And herein lay the seeds of a constant source of conflict. A job that was supposed to take 2 years to complete ended up taking 6 years as the contractors ran into all sorts of problems. Workforce, weather, inefficiencies in how the cement was being delivered and poured. And as you can imagine, it led to frequent meetings between Rogers, his superiors in Ottawa, and representatives of Corey and Lavigure, including Corey himself. The meetings became more acrimonious, they became more heated. The contractors went around Rogers' back and appealed to the minister directly. It was a very difficult situation. And through it all, Rogers maintained his professional integrity and professional expertise in seeing the job done. The hydraulic lift lock proposed by Rogers worked on a very simple gravitational principle. Two metal tubs resting on iron presses or pistons moved up and down in their individual cases or wells using the simple principle of gravity. The top tub was filled with a little extra water, which made it heavier and forced the opposite tub up as it was descending once the valve controlling the flow of water between these two presses was opened. The construction of the lift lock was a massive undertaking. A large labor force of pick and shovel men, horses hauling out the earth, digging the pits for these two presses, 75 feet down. It was an amazing technological challenge and an accomplishment, despite the difficulties that Corey and Lavageur encountered. The second part of the project involved creating the two metal tubs that sat on top of the pistons that drove up and down. This was awarded to a firm in Montreal, the Dominion Bridge Company. Fortunately, their phase of the work proceeded much smoother and with much less acrimony than the first phase of the project. By 1904, the work was complete, although much later than had been anticipated, and ready for the official opening. Rogers was placed in charge of arranging all the ceremony for this event, and as you can imagine, it was a grand day in Peterborough. Dignitaries and politicians from Ottawa came, press from across the country were there to witness this amazing, uplifting event as it was described. And everyone sang Rogers' praise for such an innovative, creative, and bold piece of engineering. It is one of the highlights of the Trent Severn Waterway. So you would think that Rogers would go on to great things because of this accomplishment. Unfortunately, it was not the case. Throughout the construction phase, partly through complaints from Corey and Lavageur and some of the others who were disappointed at the way work was progressing, grumbling and then rumors and then innuendos started to emerge that the project was delayed because not of fault on the contractors, but because of poor management, poor decision making, poor supervision, bad design by Rogers himself. And though he was praised when the official opening took place, the rumors and the innuendos about incompetence and professional lack of judgment really started to grate on Rogers' nerves. To defend himself and to protect his reputation, he decided to deal with this head-on once and for all and asked his superiors to hire an independent investigator to put to rest all these rumors about his abilities. A big mistake. In 1896, despite the Conservatives' hope to use the canal magic to win more seats, they lost the election, and the Liberals came in 1896 under Wilfrid Laurier. Now, Rogers, his family were well-known Conservatives. In fact, his father-in-law had been a former Conservative candidate at one point. So the Liberals weren't too keen to see a Conservative in charge of this massive patronage opportunity and were quite happy to appoint an independent investigator to report on Rogers' conduct. Clearly a case of where a consultant was hired to deliver the report that the government wanted. When Henry Holgate was hired and produced his report, the results were damning. They complained and confirmed every one of the rumors about Rogers' ability and competence for canal design. As a result of the report and a series of small leaks that seemed to be continually emerging in the upper reach, not unexpected and minor by nature, but were used as an excuse by the now Liberal government to demand Rogers' resignation. And so in the winter of 1905, Rogers, realizing that the jig was up, submitted his resignation. The other section of canal expansion that was a result of the Royal Commission report in 1891 was a stretch of water from Lake Simcoe to Balsam Lake. This was particularly challenging, but the government was fortunate in having experienced canal contractors undertake this part of the work. It involved another hydraulic lift lock, as had been recommended by Rogers, at Kirkfield, again for the same reason, to allow an expeditious movement of vessels over a high stretch of ground. This time, because of the challenges in pouring concrete, a metal frame was used to support the tubs rather than the massive unreinforced concrete pour. As well, the design had to allow for centering the height of water to Balsam Lake to allow water to flow east towards the Lake Ontario and west towards Lake Simcoe. So this was not only an engineering challenge, but a hydraulic engineering challenge as well, to ensure sufficient water to allow for navigation. As I said, the government was fortunate to have experienced contractors who were responsible for building a series of locks on an artificial canal cut towards Lake Simcoe, as well as bridges, railway bridges, and road alignments to allow for the extended canal construction. All this work was completed without the complications that arose on the Peterborough to Lakefield section. And again, an official opening announced a completion of yet another phase in completing the vision back in 1833 of through navigation from Lake Ontario out to Georgian Bay.